Welcome back to Sticks and Skins. I almost messed that up. So last week we talked a lot of football, a lot about the AFC, NFC. That's sick. Um, and just about how, what each team needs. We went through. Nice. That was delicious. That was a terrible fart. Anyways,
Yeah.
so then we talked about quarterbacks, free agents who were available. Today we're going to go through some of the free agents, some of the top guys who aren't quarterbacks, because we sort of talked about them last week. Just talk about, like it says, top 20, 25 guys, places that they might fit, places that they could land, uh, the guys who've been franchise tagged already, we won't talk about. But a lot of the big
Mm.
names, especially guys like Javon Hargrave, Jesse Bates, so on, we'll get into them where we think that they go, what makes the most sense, because oftentimes that's not the same thing. If the
Yeah.
guy's chasing money, where he should go and where he does go aren't always the same thing. So, Lawrence, I'll let you kick it off for us.
And as Corey said, like we're not going to discuss the quarterbacks. We talked that in depth, and we're kind of going to be using kind of just as a guide. If you subscribe to the Athletic, you know how great they are. They compiled a very nice list of the top 150 free agents. We're not going to be going down 1 through 20 on them. Corey and I just went through and kind of selected some of the people we think are interesting and could have some maybe potential hidden impact in free agency. So maybe some under the more radar guys. So if a plug for the Athletic, even though they're not paying us, uh,
Yeah,
uh,
seriously, they're like, don't.
but like they are a great service. Like I have subscribed to them for years and never even think about when it comes time to pay it. It is the articles by Larry Holder and David DeChant if you are
Oh,
interested in it.
gotcha.
And to kick off our free agency talk, we're going to start at number 4 on that list of theirs, number 1 in our hearts,
Hmm.
Javon Hargrave, the defensive tackle currently of the Eagles. And then when the league year hits, he'll be a free agent. He had a monster year last year for the Eagles, 11 sacks, second in the NFL behind the ever dominant Chris Jones. From that perspective, he does turn 30 this year. So what do you think is in the future for Mr. Hargrave?
So here's the thing. I think you and I both are sort of we're tainted by Madden, because in Madden, especially the old Madden, as soon as a player hit 30, their ranking went down. As soon as they hit 30, it was like that magic number 30. Okay, they go down 1 to 3 points,
Mm-hmm.
and so like that's I say that because I see 30, I'm just like ugh.
Yeah.
But in all reality, I mean, guys can easily be effective for into their early 30s, 32 to 34. And so I say that because I do think he gets a sizable contract. It'll be something where it's a team will sign him for 4 or 5 years, kind of like what happened with Vaughn, but it's one that they can get out of after 2 years, 3 years
Mm-hmm.
max. Because I think he knows, right? Like he has 2 or 3 really good years left in him before things start to take effect. So um, a team that might need somebody like him that has cap space. Someone like the Lions. I
Yep, I had
mean,
them on the list.
their defense, one of the worst in the league. I think they're top three in terms of having cap space. Or am I wrong on that?
So they have a decent amount. And then you mentioned like where they stand in terms of defense. They're like 10th in the NFL with 23 million in cap space.
Yeah.
Um, if you look at the breakdown of their season defensively, the last I think 8 to 10 games of the year when they won 8 of 10,
Mm-hmm.
their points per game allowed would drop by about a touchdown or a little bit more. And they signed Aaron Glenn to an extension as defensive coordinator. So you wonder if they turn the corner and somebody like Hargrave might be that missing piece in the interior to make them even a more formidable team.
I mean, I still think they're going to go corner in the draft, and I think it's one of those things where the offense, they had one of the most potent offenses last year, so I don't think they plus Jameson Williams or Williamson, whatever his name is. He didn't really play much, and so now you have him available. I like their run game. Losing Hawkinson was a hit, but overall, I think the offense is fine. I think if they draft a corner in the first round, get Hargraves, I mean, I don't know. I think this Lions team I could easily see them making an NFC divisional round game, if not further.
Absolutely. And you mentioned earlier, like how maybe this best play and where they might go are two different things.
Mm-hmm. That was offline, though. You guys didn't hear that.
Okay. Yeah. I don't remember when you hit play or not. But the Eagles have a kind of conundrum in the sense that Fletcher Cox is also a free agent.
Cox, yeah.
So are they gonna? I mean, out of the two, I would imagine their want would be to sign Hargraves. So does he continue? Does he want to stay where he had success? His best season or does he say, this is going to be like Von Miller, my last big payday. And you mentioned the Lions. I also think the Giants and Cowboys in division have a pretty decent need at defensive tackle. And we know in the NFL, oftentimes those players like going to the division rivals, and the division rivals like, all right, you kind of wrecked us every year for the last few years. Let's get you on our side and see what you can do.
Yeah, and that, I don't know. I can't see Dallas just because I know that they're already in a bit of a cap conundrum. And so what he'll get, 15-ish million a year probably. I don't know if Dallas can absorb that. So, I mean, I feel because you say that. I think Jordan Poyer, and if he ends up in Miami or something, that would be terrible. But I don't know. I just don't see him on Philly next year, and I don't see him in that division because, again, like the Eagles, they have to pay Jalen Hurts, and he's going to get $40+ million a year, plain and simple. And so, because he's that second-round pick, like he can get an extension, and they're going to want to get him done sooner rather than later. They're paying A.J. Brown a ton. Devontae Smith, once it's time, he's going to get paid as well. So they can't stack their books with these guys on defense. It's going to be one of those things where, all right, we're either going to be an offensive team or a defensive team. And with the guys they have currently, with Goddard as well, Miles Sanders, I feel like they're going to be an offensive team that will put 30 to 33 on you any given day. And you're just going to have to score with them.
Yeah, but that's part of it's great when you find a quarterback, but once he's off that rookie year ready for it, then the whole world starts changing. And we're not done with the Eagles either. We'll be talking on them in a little bit. But moving on to the next free agent we have on our list, number 5 on the Athletic one, is the safety from the Bengals, Jesse Bates, who is, in terms of paydays, like he's in the prime real estate of age meeting productivity. He's only 26 years old. He's been a kind of staple on one of the best teams in the league the last few years. So teams that I kind of see as needing safety help, and probably one of the biggest places I could see him going would be the Falcons, who have a ton of cap space and a huge need on defense. So are they going to be like that team this year that makes those splash signings on the big name guys? I could easily see him staying in the NFC and going to another bird franchise. Not bird, we're talking about another, the Falcons.
Yeah. And I think Arthur Blank said that essentially, the GM has a blank check that they were willing to spend, and I think what you said is where he ends up going. I think Atlanta offers him a deal that's probably $2 or $3 million more a year than everybody else. He'll reset the safety market, which is what all guys want to do. I get that, But yeah, I mean, I think Atlanta is definitely where he's going to go, just because the teams that it makes as much sense or even more sense, they just don't have the money. And I mean, because again, Cowboys makes a lot of sense. Um, Browns, Seahawks, but I don't know
Mm-hmm.
us.
Yeah. The Seahawks, I think, would be like very interesting because think of the heyday of their them. They had the Legion of Boom,
Mm-hmm.
uh, two fantastic safeties. So I'm glad you brought them up. I think that could be an under the radar team for them because they're not in a bad spot cap wise. They sit currently ninth with 24, nearly
Got to pay
25
Gino.
million. Yeah, they got to do something with Gino, but that could be an under the radar guy. But to me, I think we both kind of just said it. The Falcons seem like a spot for Bates and where he can get his deal, get his money, and the Falcons start trying to build something with their nearly $100 million in cap space. That's just insane amount of cap space.
Yeah.
That is 30. Just by the way, that is 32 million. Like it's just a crazy amount. So we're kind of in agreement there. So we'll move on to our next one. This is not the ideal situation in terms of age and stuff, but as you mentioned with the Madden thing, Bobby Wagner proved last year age is just a number.
Mm-hmm.
He went to the Rams after a long and productive, some would argue Hall of Fame worthy career with the Seahawks and had an outstanding season. He was a second team All Pro, 140 tackles, 6 sacks, and he hits the street again this season. So, where do you think the best spot for Mr. Wagner would be?
I mean, gosh, right? Depending on where, and this is one of those things where this will likely be another 2 or 3 year deal where a team can get out of it if they want after a year or so. I mean, he definitely is on the year to year thing, sort of like with Jason Kelsey and how it was with
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Whitworth, because they're still good, they're still all pro caliber players, but Father Time can get you at any moment. I mean, places that he makes a lot of sense. I mean, gosh, and this, see, a lot of this does depend on what happens in free agency, because I look at us, the Bills, and I think it makes a lot of sense if Edmonds leaves, because Wagner, he's a leader, and you'd be
Mm-hmm.
losing Poyer and Edmonds, two huge leaders on that team. He already has a rapport with Vaughn. He has the respect of his peers around the league. He can clearly still play, and at times it feels like the Bills had somebody in the middle that could, they needed help getting in the right spot, and I feel like getting somebody like Bobby Wagner who knows just defense, he knows the NFL, he could help the young guys. So I think the Bills make a lot of sense, but then again, I mean, it comes down to just dollars and cents. The Bills will end up having probably 20 to 30 million in space after Bean does his magic
Mm-hmm.
and finds dollars here and there, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But who else outside of Buffalo?
Uh, I mean, I don't think we already mentioned the Falcons in terms of needing just defense, but I don't see Wagner going to a team that's kind of building things up.
Right.
I think somebody like the Dolphins might be whose linebackers for years have just underperformed and kind of been exposed
Mm-hmm.
yearly. They kind of make sense in terms of I feel like they want to go all in this year on dethroning the Bills and making a push to be one of those top teams in the AFC. So I think they're an under the radar team. Um, the Vikings need an overhaul on defense, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so he would go to a team that won a ton of games last year, and whose offense still seems like they'll be firing on all cylinders.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they could be an under the radar team as well.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so Bobby Wagner, his services will be in demand, but I imagine he's going to be extremely picky. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. Maybe he is I think because you said aside from the Bills, but for me, I think if the Bills do lose Edmonds in free agency, he'd be an ideal bridge guy to keep the Bills defense clicking. Plus, they can maybe draft someone mid rounds that learn behind him and Milano and take that next step.
Mm-hmm.
Next up on our list, we're going to have a pair of running backs. We'll kind of combine them both so we can just talk about running backs in general and see what we think the best fit for both would be.
Right.
The NFL's leading rusher from last year, Josh Jacobs, is a free agent, which still is kind of really weird to me that he's hitting the market.
Mm-hmm.
And as of right now, Saquon Barkley, but I think a lot of it depends on, are they able to lock up Daniel Jones or that he's a franchise tag? So they have to choose between those two. But as right now, he's not. So we'll group them together. To me, I think Barkley would be best fit staying in New York, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Jacobs, my goodness, I could see him going to a lot of places. I think the Eagles have an underrated need at running back. Because if you look at last year, like they just kind of playing a lot of different running backs.
Mm-hmm.
If they could have somebody like him that just is the bell cow and the other guys are more filling the gaps, and Miles Sanders is a free agent himself.
Right.
So I think the Eagles are an option, and the Dolphins could be one. You saw how many running backs they sign every year. They're trying to find that one guy that can be it for them. And to me, over his career so far, Jacobs has shown he could be that guy.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, Barkley staying and Jacobs, one of those two teams, I think would be ideal.
How much cap space do the Dolphins have?
Dolphins. Let's look them. I have it over on Spot Rack. Oh, as of right now, 15 million over. But like you already said it with the Bills, that's just a few restructures away from being in a position where they can make moves.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, because a guy like Jacobs, he knows, right? He has maybe like teams will pay running backs most oftentimes until they're 28, 29. I mean, the rare Adrian Peterson and Derrick Henry aside. So I mean, I honestly think he's just going to go to whomever is going to pay him. I think I read today on ESPN that people think that if they can't come, think that if the Raiders and Jacobs can't come to an agreement, that they would just hit him with a franchise tag. And I could have sworn that I also read that the Giants weren't going to tag Barkley.
So yeah, that would be interesting. So I mean, if that happens, I already said the Giants would be the best. Where do you think best spot for Saquon would be?
I mean,
outside of the Giants.
Oh, and again, like this is what would be his best fit versus where's the place he's going to get paid the most. I think for Saquon, because he's such a lethal weapon, but because with the Giants they don't have a threat at quarterback, so he saw a lot of 7-8 man boxes, which is probably part of the reason why he got hurt. But I think where he should go is a place that has a stable quarterback. I mean, again, I doubt the Chiefs could afford him, but imagine him in Kansas City, in Buffalo, anywhere that has a competent quarterback that defenses have to respect. That's where I think he should go. But
yeah, that makes sense.
And I know Houston has that guy out of Florida, or is it Florida or Alabama?
Alabama, I think it was. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but I mean, if they go and it sort of is the problem that he's currently in, but if he's going to get paid, whatever. But you draft a rookie quarterback number 1 overall, and then you have a guy like Saquon who can take pressure off him because he's an outlet. He can run the ball. He's good in pass protection. If we're talking about a place where he could go and get paid, I don't think that the Houston necessarily has a need there. But I mean, if they're going to go the route of a rookie quarterback, I mean, you could have. I mean, I could think of outside of maybe Christian McCaffrey and Josh Jacobs. Like, there's not a lot of guys that would really be a benefit to a rookie quarterback, and I don't know. I can just see that helping overall.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think you mentioned it too. Just running back is the one position where I feel like you mentioned like most money. That's like the one where I think you're right that they know their shelf life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think money almost always is going to win out in this position particularly. Other positions, maybe I'll take a few million less to go to a team that will really feature and use me in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
These running backs, like, this is their contract. This is going to be it. And Damian Pierce was from Florida.
Damian Pierce.
But money-wise, the Raiders have $46 million. So you wonder why didn't they, like, they don't want to spend the money on him, or like it still baffles me my mind that they didn't lock him up already.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, shoot, again, you talk about crazy stuff, right? Like, if Baltimore doesn't use the exclusive, we were going to talk about quarterbacks, but here we are. If Baltimore does not use the exclusive franchise tag, like that one where if the team pays them too much, they get 2 first-round picks.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, dude, that makes so much sense. All right, you have a ton of cap space. You get a rookie quarterback on a rookie quarterback deal. You have a legit defense. You can pay a guy like Saquon. You draft the quarterback and his receivers. You pay a guy like Odell. Like, hey, listen, you're in the twilight of your career. We're gonna pay you a little bit more than what you're worth. Just shut up and be there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just like. I love Lamar. I like his attitude. Like how he plays football. I really do. But it just doesn't feel like he's going to be a Baltimore anymore.
No.
Be a Baltimore, gosh. Be a Raven anymore.
No, yeah, I don't think so either. So that'll be interesting to see where those two top flight, and if to see if that report you read today is true. I mean, slap the franchise tagging Jacobs running backs, it makes sense. Get a few years out of it, then you're not locked in after that, and you can go draft the next one.
Actually, yeah, I see it right here. Raiders playing franchise tag for Jacobs.
All right, so
again, this is from
scratch him off the list.
Somebody from ESPN. I don't really know who they are or anything, so just take it for what it is.
All right, moving on to our next free agent. We're going to go back to the defensive side of the ball. And the Eagles, I promised they'd be back. They are. James Bradberry is a free agent for the Eagles this season. The Athletic article has him ranked as the 11th best free agent. He is 30 years of age, but as you mentioned, that might just be the Madden in us saying, 30, bye-bye, see you later. What do you think the best spot for Bradberry would be?
Gosh. Yeah, I mean, so I think if the Vikings don't end up doing something with Patrick Peterson, because they've clearly shown, I mean, granted, it was, I think, the older regime. But still, right, like they've shown, at least the GM anyways, that they are willing to go and sign corners who are, on the latter half of their prime. And so I don't know that about James Bradberry, but it just seems like a place that has a need, who has shown the willingness to, make deals with him. He's going to get paid probably, I don't know, 12 to 15 million or something. And so it just seems like that would make a lot of sense with just, a team that has a need, a GM who will pay players like him, and they might have to do a little work to be able to afford him, but that fit just seems to make sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And I'm going to go back to the interdivisional thing. The Giants have a plethora of cap space, $43 million. They have a need at cornerback, and Daboll comes from the Bills, who spent early draft capital and then put a big contract when he earned it on Tre'Davious White. Does he get Bradberry to kind of get a few years out of him right when his team seems to be hitting the peak? I think the Giants could be an underrated place for him to go. And pretty much anybody on defense, I think we could attach to the Falcons.
Yes.
They have so much cap space. We already mentioned Bates being there. I could easily see Bradberry going there as well. So, and I mean, a lot of times these players who are on Super Bowl teams, like, they really try to cash in that next year So because he signed a Bradbury signed a 1 year kind of like prove it to me deal last year.
Mm-hmm.
So was last year an aberration because he was on one of the best teams in the league, or is that just a sign of Geno-ish things to come that he's just hitting his stride now at 30?
Yeah. But unfortunately for him, unlike a quarterback who can play into their late 30s, yeah.
Yeah, but and I think aside from the Falcons and Giants, I think like you said, the Vikings, whose defense was pretty much all year atrocious,
Mm-hmm.
I think they're in a pretty decent spot for him as well.
Yeah.
And a good point you brought up of the history of bringing Peterson in and getting a few good years out of him when he was kind of on the twilight of his career.
Right. Yep.
Speaking of twilight of the careers, that's a great transition to our next top free agent, Levante David, the longtime Bucks linebacker, is set to hit the market this year. He kind of got his time in the sun when Brady went there and people really saw how good he was. I live in the Tampa area, so like since I've lived here the last almost decade now, the Buccaneers are a team that's always on TV. So like I've come to really appreciate the type of player he is. Um, he's a leader. Even last year at 33 was Pro Football Focus's number 3 off the ball linebacker in the league.
Mm-hmm.
He played 96% of the snaps. So the Heat in Florida. If you've ever been here, my God, and even with his age, he's still able to play. I'm just gonna ignore the Falcons because they can be on every one of these guys. Um, I think a team like I already brought him up, like the Dolphins again could bring in a veteran like him. He already knows Florida. He's good with the Heat. He could be somebody that maybe puts their defense over the top.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think he's going to be one of those guys that he wants to, win more. He's not probably going to be looking to like get the max amount of money going to a team like Miami who has a need in the position, but also is, they could, depending on how Tua plays or how his brain holds up, they could easily be a team who's in the mix to make it to the Super Bowl. I was gonna say the Bears, but that would sort of be like if he chased after the money because the Bears have a need there, but they're not going to be in any contention. So no, I mean I think you're right. I think Miami makes a lot of sense. I think other teams, Kansas City. I don't know their linebackers all that well, but just thinking of teams that,
Yeah. And would you take less to go there to win a title and know that we don't have to be great to win with Mahomes on defense, just stop the other team a few times.
Mm-hmm. I mean, but the same is true with the Bills, right? I mean, like, yeah, I don't want to say them every time because essentially if Edmonds leaves, any available linebacker would be needed. But yeah, it's the same thing. A team whose Super Bowl window is open, good quarterback, solid core and defense, good coaches. I mean, Andy Reid I think is awesome. McDermott is great. So going to a place like that, that's pretty stable. Or Seattle, right? I mean,
yes.
They on this list here, yeah. I mean, like Pete Carroll, great guy. I mean, they have obviously an illustrious history at the middle linebacker position. They were a really good team next year. If Geno plays as well, maybe a little bit better, they could, easily win 10 to 12 games. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And I mean, they have a lot of draft capital still from Russ trade, so yeah, I think that's a good team you brought up, the Hawks. And just as we're about halfway through this, there's teams that have needs of the players we're talking about, like the Steelers have a decent amount of needs, but we're not really mentioning them, I think, because really when you think of the history of the Steelers for a long, long time, they're not really one of those teams that's going to make the big free agent splash.
Yeah.
So
I think you could say that about the Bills too, right? Like, remember when Mario Williams came? We're like, don't let him leave. Don't let him leave.
Lock the doors.
Yeah, I was say the same thing with with Vaughn. Obviously, like yeah, it isn't often. We got To for a year. It's a big deal when these guys come, and so
Yeah.
yeah, as you said, it doesn't happen often.
No. And I mean, the Steelers are successful. The Bills, the last, I think, 6 years now have been successful. It seems like the teams that are like the free agent winners are often those like less than stable franchises, like
Mm-hmm.
draft, develop, hit the big splash every once in a while to supplement your team. So, moving from Levante, we have another Bucks teammate, and we're going to couple the next two together because they're both from the defensive backfield. We have Jamel Dean from the Bucks, a cornerback, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson, another Eagle, is on this list. Which you talked about money with the Eagles. They have to kind of pick and choose who they're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll tackle Dean first and Gardner-Johnson. We've already talked about teams that need cornerback help. Falcons, obviously. But I look at Dean. I look at the Jags having a need because, they're getting rid of Shaquille Griffin, who their big free agent signing from a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Dean would make a lot of sense, and the Jags are no longer the Jags. They're the Jags. So he could be a possible
Duval.
for them.
I
Oh my
hate that
God,
so much.
it's the worst. It's right up there with JETS, Jets. In terms of annoying fan
It
chant.
doesn't make any sense. It's the county. Like
Yeah,
what?
who cares?
Stupid.
Anyway, so I think that would be a good spot. What do you think about Dean's outlook?
Yeah, he's gonna have his pick of the litter, right? There's just so many teams. You have a guy who's in his primes, played really well. I'd like to think that Philly is not gonna let both these guys go. Okay, they can't afford to lose them both. Plus Fletcher Cox, but yeah. So, I can see him, staying in Philly either by his choice or not. I don't think Philly loses him. I think he either gets an extension, they franchise him, something, but they don't let him go.
You mentioned Gardner-Johnson. He's only 25. So if he plays this right, he could get one deal and still get another pretty decently sized one a few years from now.
Yeah, absolutely. Do this one now they always want to get paid, but yeah, no, absolutely. And it's the same thing with Jamel Dean. I know Brady kind of did the Bucks raw by retiring and leaving them with a 45 or 40 whatever $1 million bag.
Yeah.
Because you talk about like having a defense, because the Bucks still have Devin Bush, right?
Yeah, they still got him at linebacker.
Yeah, so you have him, Antoine Winfield, and Jamel Dean, and who's the other corner they have? They extended him last year.
Yeah, Murphy maybe, and they also that defensive tackle they have is pretty good too.
Yeah. Vita Vea.
Yeah.
But so their defense is solid. I think that they need to really lean into their defense the next few years while they get the quarterback position figured out, because they're going to get rid of Evans. They already got rid of Fournette. Brady's gone, so they're going to, I think, have to invest in defense to keep that team afloat until they figure out what they're going to do at quarterback. So
yeah,
for me, I think what makes the most sense is for these teams to stay where they're at. As you said, I think.
And Carlton Davis is the guy you were talking about.
Carlton Davis, yes, him. So that secondary, that's a solid core of young guys. But yeah, no, all the, as you said before, there's a lot of teams that need help in the secondary. It's just, in a way, you're gonna have to pick and choose where you spend your money, because there's very few teams that can afford to sign more than one of these guys.
Yeah, and if you're able to see our screen right now, we do prep work on this. We don't just jump in here and talk. Our cornerback needs team is pretty big, so it's kind of cornerback and offensive line are just so many people need them because there's such a dearth of like talent at that position. Like, and like teams are in nickel or dime. How much now? So you need not just two anymore. You need three minimum that are going to play more than 50% of your snaps. So it's such a hugely desired and needed thing that so many like if you just put money aside, everybody would love to have these two on their team. And I mean, cap aside, I would love for the Bills to get Gardner Johnson to replace Poyer, but that'll never happen. Moving on, we have another running back, kind of an under the radar one, but I honestly think he's not going to be on this list for long. Tony Pollard of the Cowboys. They've already sunk so much money into that position with Zeke's contract. But what do you think the outlook for him? Do you think he's kind of either tagged or staying in Dallas, or what's his future hold?
Oh, yeah, no, I 100% think he will be in Dallas. I mean, I think they'll see, his agent will make sure they see it if they don't, how their offense runs without him on the field. It really sucks for him that he had that major ankle injury at the end of the year. But I still think his biggest value and where he'll likely make the most money is in Dallas, because he's so fast, he's so explosive. He's great out of the backfield, and he just means so much to that offense. And so Zeke might be back. I think it'll definitely be on a team friendly. You know, you're getting paid $3 or $4 million a year, not the 12 to 15 that you had been making. But I don't know. It just seemed like Dallas just makes way too much sense, especially for a position that there are two other guys available that aren't coming off major injuries that are a little bit better. And who knows, right? I mean, you know, Jerry, he definitely likes to make splashes. Right? Saquon, Jacobs, come here and get rid of Pollard. He's hurt. Get rid of Zeke, whatever.
God, yeah. To me, it's very clear. Like, the Cowboys are just on TV all the time, whether you live in that area or not.
Which I do.
You do, yeah. But to me, it was pretty clear. Like Pollard, when he was in there, just the offense looked so much more explosive and dynamic, and like not as predictable. It felt like Zeke is a good pass blocker, but I don't feel he's much of a threat anymore out of the backfield in terms of, he's going to torch us here.
Those days are.
But do you think that has an impact on Dallas? Of we signed Zeke and like he's kind of every year went down since then. Does that hold like any sway over Jones? Do you think of maybe we don't want to do that again at that position?
I think maybe if it was another GM on another team, yes. But it's Jerry MF and Jones. And that guy is in the twilight of not only his career, but his time on this earth. And it's like dropping a blue whale out of an airplane, man. He'll make the biggest splash he possibly can. And so that's why I say, as much sense as it makes to have Pollard stay in Dallas, I just see him going, we got Josh Jacobs, or we got Saquon Barkley, and da-da-da-da with Dak, and whatever else. I don't know. I can just see it. I feel like anyone, if they're honest with themselves, they can see that too.
No, that's a good point.
I'll say one place I don't want him to go: Buffalo. So help me God, if we spend money on a running back and not on defense, woof. All right, sorry. Go ahead.
No, yeah, running back is one thing that I think we would both kind of almost realistically vomit over. 3 second-round picks in the last 4 years, plus a trade for another running back. So, yeah,
I would talk loudly at a puppy. Okay, I would be that upset.
But not a cat. You would never do that for that.
I'm still thinking about that fart that you low-key just destroyed earlier. Gosh,
my microphone's really good. We did have 3 viewers, and then they
all died.
They must have smelled or something.
All right, next time.
That set the tone for the show right there. Come back for more of that every week, guys. Our first defensive tackle, not our first, kind of our youngest defensive tackle, Draymond Jones
Mm-hmm.
of the Broncos. And we already brought up the Lions. To me, that's a perfect fit of what he is as a player. Just like he's not going to be really explosive. He did come off his best season last year, 6.5 sacks, but he's just like a grinded out, I'm there every day type of guy. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, that makes a lot of sense with what Dan Campbell's trying to build in Detroit.
Yeah, no, and that's definitely Dan Campbell's kind of guy. Just brings his lunch pail to work and does his thing, and he does it really well. So yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Again, I'll keep it. Maybe this is the easy way out, but the Broncos have already lost a lot of guys on that defense, and they still somehow were really good. I think part of it was because wasn't Vic Fangio their coordinator last year? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think part of it was him. I think he is really good, but I also do think that it's guys like Jones who, again, they just did their job and they made it easier on the guys that were behind them, where he has a ton of value. And again, a team like Broncos that they're obviously paying Russell a lot. Sutton got paid. Where do they sit on the cap space spectrum?
Denver is sitting at, let's see, where is Denver? Denver. Broncos are middle of the road. They have just over $12 million in cap space.
Yeah, so if they're going to spend any money and keep one, I think it's a young core piece of that defense, especially after getting rid of Chubb and losing Bond the year before. And yeah. And I promise I'll only do that one more time where I say the player goes back to the team.
But I think when you look at the last few years of free agency, that's how a lot of it goes.
Mm-hmm.
The players, like, oh, they're going to go here and there. And a lot of them just like I've read articles like where the players hit free agency and they don't like it. Like, it's not what they thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them just like, I'm comfortable here. I know this here. Just give me a deal. So I don't think it's a cop-out answer at all to say he's familiar with it. He knows the team. Their family's there. They're settled in. So that's a very realistic thing. And we'll lump the next player in, Zach Allen, who's also defensive tackle. For the Cardinals, Lions, obviously. To me, also, you mentioned the Bucs. If they had the money for you, because you brought up like just keeping that defense fortified, put him and Vita Vea together, the secondary you already mentioned, in a fairly weak division in terms of offense too. That could be a place for Zach Allen to go.
Yeah, and here's the thing too. It's guys like Zach Allen that I have absolutely no idea what they would be worth to a team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he is the kind of the middle of the road player that I think would go to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Right. Because they obviously are willing to spend a bunch on the defense, or Philly, right? They lose. They miss on their two corners. Fletcher Cox is going. All right. Well, shoot. Let's at least shore up our front seven. I don't know.
The Steelers, I think, is a good one that you brought up, and I think you said a good point of the kind of being the guy they would target, like not a big splash guy, but they can get through 3 to 5 productive years out of him. He's only 26 coming into the season, so yeah, that seems like a good point you brought up there.
That's it. I do it all the time.
About time my back's hurting carrying the show.
Yeah. Other reasons I can't say.
Well, you did highlight this is not for kids, so.
Yeah, well, my students watch this, and.
Yeah, our students are vastly different ages. Just to go off on a tangent here, I teach elementary school, kindergarten, and 5th, physical education. Dr. Dungan teaches a little bit of a more advanced type of student.
Yeah, college age, but not physical education. I know my rules.
So yeah, your kids might enjoy it. My kids are like, What's MFing, Coach Foster?
Got
Many
'em.
flops, children.
Many flocks.
He's the Vladi Divac that he meant. He's talking about Vladi, flopping all
Vladi.
over the place. And it's a nice transition you did there. Maybe you did it on purpose. Our next free agent is another cornerback of the Steelers, Cam Sutton.
Mm.
He's just shy of 30, 28 years old. Decent season last year for the Steelers. But as we already mentioned, cornerback is such a hot commodity in the league. The Steelers don't seem to have a history of breaking the bank for players that are middle of the road or slightly above average. So what do you think a spot for Mr. Sutton might be?
Yeah, but I mean, but Pittsburgh is the kind of team that if he is one of their guys, right,
Mhm.
that they would. Not to mention, they are likely going to lose Edmonds. Levi Wallace is obviously was just a short-term fix, and so
Mhm.
you look at their secondary, and they need guys. They need people that they know what their ability is. But I don't want to use my go to the same team on him. So,
Oh,
back
well, you're
to
the
that.
creator of the show, so you can break the rule too if you decide later. I'm not going to hold you to this is your last one.
Sick. But yeah, no, that whole list of teams where, again, you think about teams who have a lot of cap space, like the Falcons, who, hey, you know what? They're only offering you 6.5. We'll give you 8,
Mm-hmm.
and then they have someone that they can plug in right away and a veteran guy, and yeah, like the Jags, like the Vikings. This middle of the road, solid corner. He's not going to go and likely make that splashy play to win you a game, but he also just going to do his job. So if he doesn't stay in Pittsburgh, obviously one of those quarterback needy teams, but because this is likely his last big deal, I imagine money might be a bit more of a
Yeah.
factor.
And you say like they're not going to make a splash play, but like, and that's what the NFL is. Those are the people that win you the games every week.
Yeah.
So that could be one of those ones at the end of the year. Like, man, that was a really great signing. Looking back on it, didn't garner much attention at the time. So yeah.
Yeah.
He also kind of be like a very New England-y type sign too. Like, oh, he's a veteran, kind of maybe undervalued. Sounds like a Patriot.
Well, so you said, and I know this isn't really what this segment is about, but you mentioned somebody who has quite a bit of draft capital, and somebody who might be available via trade and needs a cornerback. I mean, that'd be interesting to see what happens with Jalen Ramsey.
Yes.
Because
Well, let's go up on that tangent. Like, we got time. So, what do you think is like? What do you think happens to him then?
I think he gets traded to a team who is willing to, give him an extension, give him a little bit more money. So he hasn't played as well as he had in the past, but he's still a premier corner.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention, right? Like they like quarterbacks. I think they get paid a little bit more than they're worth. They get drafted a little bit higher than they probably were worth.
Yeah.
Because they are so important. So, I mean, yeah, like any team who that does, because I think you're going to have to give at least one, probably not 2 first rounders, but yeah, a first rounder or a first and a second at most. And so a team that has extra ones of those, like Seattle, like Houston, and who has the cap space to then give him an extension, right?
Yeah. So you think that's a pre-draft trade, or do you think after free agency, a team that maybe whiffed on any of the cornerbacks we talked about, be like, all right, let's go get. So when do you think that deal might happen?
I mean, because free agency starts next, the 15th?
Yep, March 15th.
So I don't know. I mean, I think before the draft, early April, because in a way, right, like the Rams could be secret buyers in this cornerback market because they know they're just going to trade Ramsey.
No. Do you think that's contingent on them getting somebody, or you think it's happening regardless of what happens?
I think it's happening regardless. They went and played this game of, we're going to kick the can down the line. We're going to
Mhm.
borrow from Peter to pay Paul. But you know, a phrase that I like, the bill comes due. And the bill is now due for the LA Rams. I don't think, I think that's part of the reason why Sean McVay stayed, because it's just not his character to sort of, oh, hey, we won a Super Bowl and I'm going to leave you holding this mess that I made, because it really is a mess.
Oh, yeah.
They have an old roster full of all timers, uh, but it's not in a good spot. So they need to get some value in places that they still can, and Ramsey is one of the few, because Donald probably has another year, maybe two.
Yep.
Stafford, if he makes it through this year, that would be amazing. Cup, I think, is 29, coming off a major knee injury. Allen Robinson has done next to nothing. So they need to restock, and they need to restock with young guys. And yeah, I think someone that would give them a first and maybe a second for Ramsey. He's going to be gone, especially right, because the cornerback market is so deep this year.
Yeah.
And so actually, what you said, that makes a lot of sense. Where if a team goes after one of these top guys, they can't get him, but they feel like he would put us over the edge. Imagine Ramsey going back to Jacksonville.
Oh God. Yeah. Look, that. I haven't even thought of that possibility. That would be
What a
something, right?
story! What a story! Or
Yeah, because he was there the last time they were playing, like where they should have won the AFC Championship.
mm-hmm.
Freaking choked that game away against the Patriots.
or
So
I mean, again, things that'll never happen. But 5 or 6 years after calling Josh trash, they send Kaiir Elam and a second-round pick to the Rams for Jalen Ramsey.
right.
Madden dreams.
I was gonna say Madden right there.
Clear cap penalties, please.
Yeah. Forced trade. Thanks.
Hmm.
So yeah, that was a good and worthy tangent and to go off on, and something we hadn't mentioned and probably is going to happen. But going back to our free agency outlook, we have two position groups left. We're going to group players together on that. The first one we'll talk about, they're all playmakers, but we'll go to the wide receivers. We've already talked about Odell. So we have Odell, who obviously didn't play last year, coming off the torn ACL in the Super Bowl the year before with the Rams. So they got the hardware after sacrificing everything. But you and I talked about this player last week, Jakobi Meyers, who is, I think, somebody that could blossom kind of like Christian Kirk did with the Cardinals if he can get an offense and a quarterback who can showcase his skills.
Oh man, that's a guy I would love for us to get. I would love, because he just you see what he did in that offense, or the what offense, right? He made some great catches. He has speed to stretch the field. So, as you said, if he got in with a team with a quarterback who can make plays, can get him the ball, I think this guy could really blossom. Now, this is one that I definitely hope that the Bills are able to pick up. But again, I can see him going to, because Kansas City, if they don't re-sign Juju, Hardman's also a free agent, so they are in the need. And again, it's the same thing. He would, as you said, he would flourish with a guy like Allen or Mahomes. So.
Oh yeah. No, why do you have to say Mahomes? Yeah, I would love him in a Bills uniform, but I could also see him really exploding with the Chiefs, which would be the worst.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Odell and like trading for Hopkins will get the big headlines. But I think when we look back on it in a year or two, that Myers will be the best get for anybody that's needing a wide receiver.
Yeah, and I really hope that we don't go and overpay Odell or spend anything more than like a third-round pick for Hopkins, because it's just, we're doing what everyone, what the Rams are doing. Right? We're trying to stockpile these like stars that have maybe 1 or 2 good years left in them, or 1 or 2 great years left in them, and hoping we can make it all work. And I mean, not that I have a huge issue with what Diggs did at the end of last year because I know he wants to win. But you don't need more than one of those guys on the field. Okay, we don't
Yep.
need him and Hopkins or somebody else who just has a strong personality. That one of them is good for the team if it's directed in the right way. I think Diggs is. But yeah, getting two
Yeah.
Odell. Are you kidding me? No thanks, man.
No. I think that would be a toxic mixture.
But a guy like Myers, who going to come in, he knows he's not on Diggs's level, so there's already going to be that mutual respect. He's played against Josh and probably been like, ah, dang, I wish we had that. I think he's going to appreciate being where he's at, and he would just do really well. So no, I'm totally with you. I think in 2 years when we're doing this, making 1.6 million a year ourselves, that he's going to be one of the top three signings.
And just quickly to go off of that, we haven't really brought the Bears up much. The Bears, $98.8 million in cap space.
You couldn't pay me enough to play for the Bears. That's an absolute lie. You totally could. I am for sale. But it's just because I don't know. I put don't say it, Fields in the same category as, or not the same obviously because he hasn't won anything, but in the similar category as Lamar. We're just can he make plays with his arm because of his legs? And if his legs are damaged, as started to happen to Lamar, is that going to pull away from his arm? And so yeah, it makes sense for him to go to the Bears, right? Because they have a need. Who's that other guy they have?
They traded for Claypool from the Steelers.
Not Claypool, the one that they already had that made.
Hold on 1 second, I'm pulling it up.
He made Ramsey look silly.
Oh yeah, hold on 1 second. The Bears, but yeah,
or something.
It is
Dontrell Mooney.
Yes, that's who. Yeah, Darnell Mooney.
Darnell, there we go. Sorry, Darnell, when you never watched this, apologize.
Yeah, when you watch it tomorrow, we apologize.
Oh, sick! My two favorite fat boys, sick. But yeah, so sure, that would be great. They have. I think their tight end is pretty solid. Their run game is good, but I don't think that's the problem. I don't know. It's just Ohio State guys. They just.
No, they're not. And we joke about it. I'm an Ohio State fan, but
there's data, all right.
I'm very realistic I'm very realistic that their quarterbacks do not transition to the NFL. There's a lot of positions like Ohio State's receivers. I'd take them any day. They produce in the NFL, but for some reason, the people throwing them the ball don't really translate to the NFL. But the Bears kind of have to do what the Bills did with Allen. Okay, we're heading into year 3. We need to get him weapons to see if he can be the guy. Because he's shown his legs can do it. He's shown flashes of passing. But Mooney and Claypool and Cole Kmet, is that going to be enough to tell you if he's good enough?
Well, no, and I'm not saying that you don't get him somebody, but Myers isn't that guy. Myers isn't that next level dude that goes and says, okay, I got you a weapon. No, that's where you go and you get Odell, who I still think probably has a couple more solid years left, or you trade for Hopkins or something like that. A guy who knows how to get open, he knows how to be a quarterback's best friend, and who is still truly a weapon. I think Myers is just, he's a good option, but he needs, you to help him as much as he will help you. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's obviously it's a very likely thing, but if we're just being real, Diggs was the next level guy that elevated Josh's chance. He was that safety blanket, and few guys have hands better than DeAndre Hopkins. Drops are the worst. It crushes quarterback's confidence. It blows drives. Yeah. They're terrible. So guys like Diggs and Hopkins and Adams, not that Adams is a safety blanket, but you know what I mean? Guys who just don't drop the ball. Larry Fitzgerald, right? They're just so dependable. I don't know if Myers is him, and I think it's that guy, which is what Justin Fields needs.
And just one other, maybe one we don't have on the list, but the
You're
Jets,
wrong.
the Jets seem to have that guy in Wilson, who kind of had a really great year for them. Obviously, the offensive rookie of the year.
Oh, Zach.
But no, yeah, Zach was fantastic. But Myers wouldn't have to be the guy there. But if as a number two,
Oh yeah.
like maybe that would be a really good spot for him, whoever the quarterback ends up being.
Well, and I think that's just what he is. Like he is a number two. If he went to us, we'll just say, yeah, he obviously would play behind Diggs, but I think in front of Gabe Davis. Plays like the Chargers, right? Who are likely going to lose Keenan Allen. I think he's a perfect complement to Mike Williams because Mike Williams, he stretches the field some, but he doesn't have that really quick speed. But he is a bigger frame guy, whereas Myers has, he can run, and he would just be a little bit of a different weapon to complement Williams. So the Chargers could be a team, although they spent a ton of money in free agency last year, so I don't even know if it's feasible for them. But yeah, plus like the Chargers and just the Chiefs and whoever else.
Yeah, the Chargers currently sit at nearly 20 million over the cap.
Yeah.
By the way, so that leads us to our last three before we get to one special bonus player. The last three players we have are all tight ends. Just happy coincidence. Dalton Schultz of the Cowboys, Mike Gesicki of the Dolphins, and Hayden Hurst of the Bengals. To me, I think the one that could explode the most is Gesicki, who, after a year getting after franchise, I don't understand why, but seemed to just not be utilized in Miami last year.
Mm-hmm.
So Gesicki, the Bills last year signed. We're going to the Bills because I honestly think this would be a great fit.
Mm-hmm.
And the former editor of the Buffalo Rumblings and now works for Fan, the website that runs Rumblings, tweeted out how the Bills signed OJ Howard last year, and he felt like with the expectation of, hey, this is going to be our replacement for Sanders. But we all know how that turned out with Howard, who's looked like absolute garbage and was released, which kind of, I think, threw them for a loop. That's why the Bills didn't go and get anybody, because I think they thought, hey, we're going to be in a lot of two tight end sets here. So is this year like where maybe the vision of what the offense could be comes to fruition with a two tight end guy and Gesicki and Knox together? That'd be pretty solid.
Well, first, geez, OJ Howard, sorry, right? Like you're not garbage. Brutal over here. Yeah, he didn't play well, but golly,
spitting fire over here.
Spitting garbage. But yeah, so I agree 100%. Yeah, I do think that's why they brought Howard after he hurt his Achilles, I think, right? He had many knee injuries, but I just think he just wasn't the same. Didn't have that same, explosive pop. But Gesicki, he's good hand. He's a he's not Jimmy Graham, but that's what I think of when I think of Gesicki. He's a solid blocker, but he's not your quintessential, block. Whereas a guy like Gronk and Kelsey, they do everything great.
Yeah.
Kittle. He's your pass catching tight end who can do some blocking chip guys. I think for the Bills, it makes a absolute ton of sense, especially because you need a guy who can catch the ball, who can get open. I don't really want to bring back Cole Beasley. John Brown's not going to be there. Take some snaps from Isaiah. I think Shakir is better anyways. So now I think for us it makes a ton of sense. But then all of these teams are losing tight ends who are now in the market for a tight end, right? And so if Hayden Hurst doesn't re-sign with the Bengals, for which that makes the most sense for him is to stay there, right? He was Joe clearly. You look at other tight end before Hurst that they lost to the Jets. I forget his name.
Begin with a U.
Yeah, but they replaced him with Hurst. Hurst had a solid season. Burrow is good. He's really good. And tight ends, they do well. Anybody does well. So, but Dallas to me, again, is the hardest one because you never know what you're going to get, right? They have a finite number of dollars. and it depends on what does Jerry want to do with those dollars. Okay, does he take those dollars and find the biggest splash? He gets Saquon Barkley and Odell Beckham Jr. And he spends all of his dollars on these splashy signings where Saquon ends up getting hurt again, as does Odell, or he just destroys your team. Instead of signing a guy like re-signing Schultz, getting Hurst, getting Dak another outlet guy, because it's oftentimes what Dak needs so he doesn't force the ball and throw picks. A signing that makes more sense, because if we're honest, it makes a lot of sense it makes a lot more sense for Dallas to run 2 tight end sets anyways.
Yeah, it does.
But yeah, where they all go, we make a lot of sense. If any of these teams end up, outside of Miami, I don't think Miami goes and grabs one of these guys, but I can see Dallas, if they lose out on Schultz, trying to get Hurst or Gesicki and vice versa for the Bengals. But yeah, outside of those guys, I wonder when the Chiefs are going to start to groom the replacement for Kelsey. I don't think the solution is one of these 3 guys.
No.
But yeah. So
what about the Lions? Who traded away Hawkinson last year, but you think that would be a possible landing spot for one of these guys?
Dude, look at you. You're a flipping wizard, Harry. Yeah. Schultz, I can see him in a Lions uniform. Still roaming the dome.
And you think about Hurst, he seems like the perfect Dan Campbell guy. He goes on moving the chains a lot. He goes on to interview with them, and he's just like a football dude who just he didn't like that the Falcons and the Ravens got rid of him. They're like, just give me a chance to show what I can do, and he kind of did this year with the Bengals. So, and the Lions traded Hawkinson away and still had a really good offensive year. So he would make a lot of sense for them, and he wouldn't break the bank, even though the Lions have $23 million.
Yeah, no, I actually think the Lions do make probably the most sense in terms of team need, because all the teams I mentioned, they don't need one. It would be a great addition, but it's not a need.
Yeah.
The Lions, I think it is a need.
Yep. And then that leads us to our last player, kind of a last-second ad for us, but just so we can talk about the Bills. Ben Powers of the Ravens, offensive guard, had his best year. He got on the field and just didn't come off. And I think so many people who talk about the Bills from around the nation, sometimes I just feel like they don't watch the games. The offensive line was good because they know who Roger Saffold is. He was, again, when I say trash, just from a football sense, he was so bad last year. And the offensive line as a whole was bad. So to me, somebody like Powers, 26, coming from the Ravens would be a great fit for what the Bills need. And because Beane has said, hey, we're not going to go do a Von Miller type signing. But then Powers isn't a Von Miller signing. He's in a position of need at an age where we can sign him to a deal where we don't have to spend a draft capital at that position. He just makes a lot of sense for the Bills, in my opinion.
Yeah, dude, yeah, 100%, because Saffold is going to be gone. We re-signed Ike Bodiger, and I definitely think he could stop in and play one side or one of the guard positions. But yeah, taking care of guard. Shoot, who knows what happens with Mitch Morse if he's had a couple concussions. He's 31, I think 32. So that's about the time where those guys that get concussions, do I hang them up? Do I play a couple more years? So the Bills have needs up and down the offensive line. And yeah, you're absolutely right. The offensive line was not great. Dawkins, he took a step back. They didn't look as bad because of Josh, because he can escape, because he can, shrug off guys like Chris Jones. You know what I mean? But so yeah, the Bills, I think, 2 things that they have to address in free agency, and again, all depending on who they re-sign. I think if they're able to go and get somebody at the receiver position, and again, I think we already talked about the guy, and I'll say this: a pass catcher, either a pass catching tight end
Mhm.
or receiver, somebody who
Yeah.
can catch
Yeah.
the ball.
That's a good way to phrase it.
I'm tired of the drops. And then, yeah, offensive line. I don't want to go into the draft needing 2 or 3 positions on the offensive line, still needing a linebacker, still needing a safety potentially, still needing a receiver. I mean, addressing those in free agency, getting solid guys like Powers, like Gesicki, or, who can fill a role, fill a need. They won't break the bank. I think they'd be happy there because, life is always easier when you have an MVP caliber quarterback back there behind
Yeah.
you, and one like Josh who's actually fun. Um, and so yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think there's just of all the needs and players, yeah, getting somebody like him would be super de duper.
And you talk about Josh masking, and I think again that goes to people who talk football for a living, just looking at highlights and stats of, oh well, Josh wasn't sacked that much. Well, that's because Josh
Yeah,
saved
how many broken
the
tackles does he have?
yeah, like every single game. It's not like players just come through scot free.
Yeah.
So offensive line, I think you're right. Like I'd rather hit positions in free agency than truly take best player in the draft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But like if we go in not filling these positions, then we have to like. And I think that's part of our problem is with Bean is like, oh, we had to take this position, so they're forcing things that don't necessarily fit where they are.
Mm-hmm.
Like Boogie Basham, and after we already drafted Rousseau, like, oh, we need a couple, let's force it here. So
Or drafting man quarters and only playing zone. Yeah.
yeah, right. That makes a lot of
Now,
sense.
seriously though, it's just like White and Elam were press man, or not, were our press man corners, and they were play zone like 85% of the time. Not that they can't
Mhm.
adapt, obviously, but it's just like when you're good at something, or check
Yeah,
that. If you run a certain style defense, why not draft players that fit? I mean,
yeah, or at least maybe you start to change your scheme. Like, okay, like in the playoff game against the Bengals, oh, our zone guys just keep getting wrecked. Let's try doing press man coverage where the
mm-hmm.
receivers can't get their footing, get past the guy. Now we're gonna play 10 yards off and play our zone.
Yeah. And I
And to me,
mentioned,
we
go
did we
ahead.
talk about Frazier
No.
on I don't know. Yeah, so let's talk about that. Obviously, this week, big news out of Orchard Park was that Leslie Frazier is taking a year away from coaching. Uh, do you think that's kind of like a subtle way of saying, all right, we kind of wanted to move on, but we're going to do it this way? Or what's your thoughts on that whole situation?
Yeah, and this is where, like, again, you say people in the national media or even just whatever start talking about the Bills, like, oh, but his numbers are this, his numbers are that. Listen, I've never coached or played in the NFL. I bet it's super tough. However, I bet if you're playing against bottom of the barrel quarterbacks, it's not as tough. Okay,
Yeah.
and so if you look at the quarterbacks that we were playing against the last few years, they weren't very good. But another big striking thing that you would only ever notice if you watched the Bills is the fact that these terrible quarterbacks, we make them look good. All right, the Dolphins game, the Jets games, like these quarterbacks that the other teams are just pummeling, are making look
Mm-hmm.
stupid. We let them, set career bests, and complete all these passes because we just can't get out of zone or can't do. No,
Yeah.
like I appreciate him. I think he's a good coach, but I think it's one of those things where, because he's a silent voice on the team. He's
Mm-hmm.
63. I don't know. Maybe it's just time for him personally to move on. It likely, because of his age, he's not going to be a head coach because it's hard to build around somebody who's, you know, getting or almost 65, right?
By the
So
time he's back in the NFL, yeah.
yeah. So I think for all of these reasons, it's just okay. We need to get a new voice. We need to do something because it's the defense that's keeping us, for the most part, keeping us from that next level.
Yeah,
And
and like you mentioned the quarterbacks they played, and then when they play the really good ones, like I don't remember the last time they just stepped up and shut down a good offense.
Yeah, I mean, we beat Kansas City earlier in the year, but man, both those times we played the Bengals. We were not going to stop them the first time, and we
No.
definitely didn't the second time. Miami, when Tua played, boy, he was had some good times with us.
Yeah, concussions aside, he passed for a good amount of yards against us.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why I say like losing Poyer would hurt, but I mean, and maybe it was because he was injured, but I don't know. I just feel like this is one where we want to get out a year early than a year late, and
Yeah.
I don't know. As much as he's meant to the team and whatnot, it's a business, baby. And I just really hope that we take care of Edmonds, fill that void, because the corner that we drafted, that is not Elam, the one out of Villanova or something like that.
Bernard,
What's that?
Benford.
Benford. There we go. Yeah. I read somewhere that they are considering moving him to the safety,
Yep.
just because he's at least for us, he started at times, and so he's a bigger DB. I think he's 6'1", 6'2", and so putting him at safety, especially if you're trying to not re-sign Poyer, and talk about a perfect fit.
Yeah, and I no, and maybe that's something where the Bills are like, all right, we don't have to. We can let Poyer walk, and we're comfortable with Benford going there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a possibility.
Hamlin.
But yeah, and regardless of what happens with Hamlin, if he just makes it back to the field, God, like the emotion of that, and
Mm-hmm.
he plays it down. He's a comeback player of the year.
Yeah.
Like no matter what anyone else does.
Kind of
But at the
sucks for
same,
everybody else.
it does. But like if we're honest, like that's what should happen if he makes it back.
Yeah, kind of like.
All right, you essentially died on the field, but now you're back playing. Yeah, you're the comeback player of the year.
Don't call it a comeback, but also do.
Right. Um, so that's it for our free agents. We did go off on a
Lawrence is
couple
in
of
fact
tangents.
a free agent, so any ladies out there,
Just watch the beginning of the show and see what you can get.
a lot. There's a lot to get.
We will be back. Yeah, that's what I was referencing. So, we will be back tomorrow. We will be going to the sticks portion of our name finally. We have talked a little bit about video games, but tomorrow's show will be just a focus on video game, particularly the ones that we play on a weekly basis and that annoy us to no end. But we still do it. Rocket League and Rocket League and Call of Duty. We will talk about like our pass through them. We played Rocket League from the beginning, other than like a little bit of a gap where we stopped.
Yeah.
But after like essentially from the time Rocket League became available, we've been playing it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's weird. Like for a long time with Call of Duty, we were all right, multiplayer, but ever since Blackout, the Battle Royale stuff is what we do with Call of Duty. So we'll talk about Warzone, where we kind of see it standing, what needs to improve, and kind of, I mean, they have made improvements of just where we think the state of that game is as well.
Boom.
So that's what's on tap for tomorrow for anybody who will watch this later. We do have a few views on our stuff, and I haven't watched them, so somebody's watched something. So yeah, tomorrow, which will be Saturday, March 4th, my dad's birthday, we will be.
Oh, sick! Shout out to Marty Foster.
We will be going over some video games tomorrow to represent our sticks, part of our name, Sticks and Skins.
I did almost mess that up
At the beginning, I know. So I that's why I talked a little bit before I said the name. I am, after the first episode, I have not, so I'm very happy with myself. But thank you for everybody for joining us. I hope you had a good time. We obviously do enjoy it.
I hope you had a bad time. Actually, I hope you all hated it.
Corey and I are like obviously streaming. This is just fun for us to talk sports. We talk sports and video games a lot anyway, so we decided, hey, let's do it, on here and see what happens. So I hope you continue to join us and like the content. Like and follow us on social media. For Lawrence Foster, that is Corey Dungan. We will see you tomorrow, everybody.
Yes, I love you. Goodbye.